My name is Olivia and I am 32 years old. What started as a normal Tuesday working as a financial advisor turned into the most invasive violation of my personal space I have ever experienced. I came home to find boxes piled in my hallway, furniture rearranged, and my 7-month pregnant sister-in-law Vanessa sitting on my couch like she owned the place. My father Walter had used his emergency key to move her in without my knowledge or permission. Treason comes from those closest to you. Before I share this unbelievable story, I would love to know where you are watching from. Please hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had your boundaries trampled by family members who think they are entitled to make decisions about your home and life. Our house was not just any house. It was the culmination of 6 years of saving overtime shifts and careful financial planning. James and I had purchased this 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom craftsman-style home in a quiet neighborhood just 18 months ago. The backyard had a small garden where I grew herbs and vegetables. The kitchen featured granite countertops and stainless steel appliances we had dreamed about for years. Every corner of this 1,500-square-foot house represented our hard work and dedication. When we first moved in, we decided to give my father Walter an emergency key. It made sense at the time. James traveled frequently for work, and I occasionally took business trips that lasted several days. Walter lived just 20 minutes away and could check on the house, water the plants, or handle any emergencies. In the beginning, he respected our space and only came over when explicitly asked. My relationship with my in-laws, particularly Vanessa, had always been complicated. Vanessa was 34, 2 years older than me, and treated James more like her child than her younger brother. She had opinions about everything in our lives, from our career choices to the color we painted our bedroom. When we announced we were buying a house, Vanessa immediately started suggesting neighborhoods closer to her place, even though that would have doubled James's commute time. There was a pattern to Vanessa's behavior that I had noticed over the 5 years I had been with James. She would insert herself into our decisions, create drama when she did not get her way, and then play the victim when confronted. Last Christmas, she announced at dinner that she and Brian would be staying with us for 2 weeks in January without ever asking if that worked for our schedule. When I explained we had friends visiting during part of that time, she burst into tears and told everyone I was trying to exclude her from the family. Another time, she borrowed my car without permission because hers was low on gas and she did not want to stop at a gas station. She returned it with an empty tank and coffee spilled on the passenger seat. When I mentioned it, she laughed it off, saying, "That is what family is for." During James and my wedding planning, Vanessa insisted on being involved in every decision. She changed our flower arrangements 2 days before the ceremony because she thought her choices were better. She also tried to convince James that my chosen wedding dress was unflattering and that I should pick something else. Thankfully, James stood up for me that time. Brian, Vanessa's husband, was a soft-spoken accountant who seemed perpetually exhausted by his wife's antics. Whenever Vanessa would make unreasonable demands or create conflict, Brian would quietly try to redirect her attention or gently suggest alternatives. But he never directly confronted her behavior, which only enabled her to continue. As for my father, Walter had his own history of overstepping boundaries. Since my mother passed away 10 years ago, he had become increasingly involved in my life, often in ways I did not appreciate. He would show up unannounced at our apartment before we bought the house, claiming he was just in the neighborhood. Once, while we were on vacation, he took it upon himself to replace our living room light fixture because he thought the original one was outdated. We returned to find our perfectly good chandelier gone and a new fixture installed without our input. Walter also had a habit of giving unsolicited advice about how James and I should manage our finances, despite the fact that I worked as a financial advisor. He would send me articles about investment strategies and retirement planning with notes like, "You should really consider this approach instead of what you are doing." When I tried to explain that I was qualified to make these decisions, he would dismiss my expertise with, "I have been managing money longer than you have been alive." There were also multiple occasions when Walter invited his friends or extended family members to our home without checking with us first. Once I came home from work to find my father and 3 of his buddies watching a football game in our living room. Another time, he brought his brother's family to our house for dinner, calling me only 30 minutes beforehand to say, "We will be there at 6. I hope you have enough food." Despite having numerous conversations about respecting our space and privacy, both Walter and Vanessa continued to cross boundaries. James often found himself in the middle, torn between loyalty to his sister and standing up for our relationship. Walter, as my only living parent, used emotional leverage whenever I tried to establish limits, saying things like, "I just want to be part of your life," or "This is what family does for each other." Little did I know that their boundary violations were about to escalate to an entirely new level. The current crisis with Vanessa began 3 weeks ago. She was 7 months pregnant with her and Brian's first child, a boy they planned to name Ethan. While the pregnancy had been proceeding normally from a medical standpoint, it had apparently put significant strain on Vanessa and Brian's marriage. From what James had told me, Vanessa's spending habits had become even more extreme during her pregnancy. She had purchased an entire nursery set from a high-end boutique costing over $3,000. She had also insisted on redecorating their entire house, claiming it needed to be perfect before the baby arrived. Brian, who had recently learned his company was implementing pay cuts due to economic downturn, had finally put his foot down about the excessive spending. The breaking point came when Brian discovered Vanessa had secretly applied for and maxed out a new credit card buying baby clothes from designer brands. When he confronted her about it, a massive argument erupted. According to James, who heard the story from Brian directly, Vanessa had thrown a vase at the wall and accused Brian of not caring about their child's well-being. "How can you be so selfish?" she had reportedly screamed. "Do you want our son to have nothing, to be the only baby in the neighborhood with second-rate things?" Brian had responded by pointing out that they were now $15,000 in debt, with a baby on the way and a reduced income. The argument escalated until Brian announced he needed space and would be staying with his college friend Martin for a few days to cool off. He packed a bag and left that evening, telling Vanessa they could talk when they were both calmer. This temporary separation sent Vanessa into a spiral. She immediately called James, sobbing that Brian had abandoned her and their unborn child. James spent hours on the phone with her that night, trying to assure her that Brian just needed some time and would be back soon. But Vanessa was inconsolable, insisting she could not stay in the house alone. "What if something happens to the baby? What if I fall and no one is there to help me?" she kept saying. Despite living in a single-story house and having no medical complications with her pregnancy, James had suggested she stay with their parents, but Vanessa refused, saying their mother was too controlling and would just stress her out more. James then gently suggested she could stay with us if she absolutely needed to, but emphasized he would need to discuss it with me first. This is where my father Walter entered the situation. Vanessa, not satisfied with waiting for our answer, had apparently called Walter the next day. I later learned that she had painted a dramatic picture of being abandoned by her husband while heavily pregnant and having nowhere to go. She told Walter that James had offered their home but that I was being difficult about it. Walter, always ready to play the hero, had immediately taken Vanessa's side without hearing mine. He called her back that same afternoon with a solution that bypassed my input entirely. "Do not worry about Olivia," he had told her. "I have an emergency key to their house. We do not need to wait for her permission. Family helps family, and you need support right now." Together they hatched a plan. Walter would help Vanessa move her essential belongings into our house while I was at work the next day. James would be away on a 2-day business trip, so he would not be there to interfere. By the time I got home, Vanessa would be settled in, making it harder for me to object. What infuriated me most when I later discovered this plan was that Vanessa had not even attempted to find another solution. She had not called any of her numerous friends. She had not reached out to her own sister, who lived just across town. She had not even tried to reconcile with Brian, who later told us he had only intended to stay away for 2 nights at most. No, Vanessa had deliberately chosen the option that would create the most drama and disrupt our lives the most. And my father had eagerly enabled her, completely disregarding my right to decide who lives in my own home. The betrayal cut deep from both sides. My father, who should respect my autonomy as an adult, and my sister-in-law who had once again proven that she viewed my home and privacy as less important than her desires. They had conspired behind my back, using a key that was entrusted for emergencies to force a situation I had no say in. Neither of them had considered how this would affect me or my marriage. Neither had thought about the implications of moving a high-maintenance, emotionally volatile, heavily pregnant woman into someone else's home without permission. All they cared about was what Vanessa wanted in the moment, and my feelings were collateral damage. As I would soon discover, the actual execution of their plan was even more invasive and presumptuous than I could have imagined. That Tuesday had started like any other workday. I woke up at 6:30 in the morning, made coffee, and prepared for a day of client meetings at the financial firm where I worked. James had left the previous evening for his business trip to Chicago and would not be back until late Wednesday. We had video chatted before I went to sleep, and he reminded me that he had a presentation first thing in the morning but would call me during his lunch break. I arrived at the office around 8:15, settled at my desk, and focused on preparing reports for an important client meeting at 11. The morning passed quickly, and after my meeting, I grabbed lunch at the cafe across the street. I was just returning to my desk when my phone rang. It was Mrs. Peterson, our 65-year-old neighbor who kept an eye on the neighborhood while most residents were at work. "Olivia, dear," she said, her voice concerned, "I just wanted to check if everything is all right at your house. There is a moving truck in your driveway and people have been carrying boxes and furniture inside for the past hour." My stomach dropped. "A moving truck. Are you sure it is at our house, Mrs. Peterson?" "Oh yes, definitely. I recognize your father's car in the driveway too. I thought perhaps you were having work done, but it looks more like someone is moving in." I thanked her for calling and immediately tried to reach my father. No answer. I then called James, but as expected, he was in his presentation and could not pick up. With a growing sense of dread, I told my manager I had a family emergency and needed to leave. The 20-minute drive home felt like hours. My mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. When I finally pulled into my driveway, the scene confirmed my worst fears. A small moving truck was indeed parked there alongside my father's blue sedan. The front door of my house was propped open with a chair, and I could hear voices inside. I entered my home to find the hallway lined with cardboard boxes labeled Vanessa's clothes, baby items, and bedroom stuff. My normally tidy living room had been rearranged to accommodate what appeared to be a temporary bedroom setup. The coffee table had been pushed against the wall, the area rug rolled up and leaning in the corner, and a fold-out sofa bed extended where my seating area used to be. In the middle of this chaos stood Vanessa, directing my father as he attempted to hang blackout curtains over my living room windows. She was wearing leggings and an oversized t-shirt that stretched over her pregnant belly, looking completely at home in my disrupted space. "What the hell is going on here?" I demanded, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. Both Vanessa and my father turned startled by my sudden appearance. Vanessa recovered first, offering a casual smile as if nothing was unusual about the situation. "Oh, Olivia, you are home early. Walter is helping me get settled in. I hope you do not mind that we moved your coffee table. I need space for the sofa bed until the baby comes." "Settled in until the baby comes," I repeated, struggling to process what I was hearing. "Vanessa, nobody invited you to live here, especially not until the baby comes. That is months away." My father stepped down from the stepladder he was using, his expression a mixture of defensiveness and misplaced righteousness. "Now, Olivia, do not overreact. Vanessa is family, and she needs our help right now. Brian has left her and she cannot be alone in her condition." "Brian did not leave her," I corrected, remembering what James had told me. "They had an argument and he is taking a few days to cool off. That does not give you the right to move her into my house without even asking me." Vanessa's eyes immediately welled with tears, a response I had seen many times when she did not get her way. "I knew you would be like this. James said it would be fine for me to stay here. I have nowhere else to go and I am 7 months pregnant, Olivia. Do you want me to be homeless?" I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm despite the blatant manipulation. James might have discussed the possibility, but he certainly did not agree to you moving in today without any conversation with me. "And you have plenty of places you could go, Vanessa. Your parents, your sister, any of your friends. None of them have space for me, she countered, though I knew this was a lie. Her sister had a 4-bedroom house with just one child. I turned to my father, who I considered the greater betrayal in this situation. Dad, how could you use your emergency key like this? That key was for actual emergencies, not for moving people into my house without my permission. Walter crossed his arms, his posture stiffening. This is an emergency, Olivia. Vanessa needs help. And this is what family does for each other. I am disappointed that you are being so selfish right now. Selfish, I echoed in disbelief. It is selfish to want control over who lives in my own home, a home that James and I worked for years to afford. This is my house too, in a way, Walter said, stunning me with his entitlement. I am your father. I helped you with the down payment. You gave us a gift of $5,000 toward a $350,000 house, I clarified, my voice rising. That does not make this your house or give you the right to make decisions about it. Vanessa sat down heavily on the sofa bed, one hand on her belly, her expression pained. Please stop shouting. It is not good for the baby. I cannot believe you are making such a big deal about helping family in need. I looked around at my invaded home, my private space now filled with someone else's belongings rearranged without my input or consent. The violation felt physical, like a punch to the gut. These two people who should respect me and my boundaries had conspired behind my back and used a key entrusted for emergencies to fundamentally alter my living situation. Both of you need to leave now, I said, my voice low and steady. Vanessa, call Brian or your sister or whoever, but you cannot stay here. Dad, I want my emergency key back immediately. I am not going anywhere, Vanessa said firmly. I have nowhere else to go, and James already said I could stay. And I am not giving back the key, my father added. Not when you are behaving this irrationally. You will thank me later when you calm down and realize this is the right thing to do. In that moment, I realized this situation was not going to be resolved easily. They had no intention of respecting my wishes or my home. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and called James, hoping he could talk some sense into his sister at least. The confrontation had just begun, and I had no idea how much worse it was about to get. James finally called me back around 4:30 that afternoon after his presentation had concluded. I had spent the intervening hours in a state of simmering rage, confined to my bedroom as Vanessa and my father continued unloading her belongings into my home. I explained the situation in detail, trying to keep my voice down so they would not overhear. They did what James exclaimed, clearly shocked. I told Vanessa we would need to discuss it first. I never said she could move in right away, especially not without talking to you. Well, she is here now, I replied bitterly. With enough stuff to last months, apparently. Your sister and my father have decided they have the right to make decisions about our home without consulting either of us. James was silent for a moment before sighing heavily. I will be home tomorrow night. Just try to keep things civil until then, okay? We will sort this out when I get back. His response disappointed me. I had hoped for more immediate support, a clear statement that he would back me in demanding they leave. Instead, he seemed to be taking a wait-and-see approach, unwilling to confront the situation head-on. So, I am just supposed to accept this invasion for the next 24 hours, I asked. It is just one day, Olivia, he replied, his tone placating. Vanessa is pregnant and emotional right now. Let us not make this more dramatic than it needs to be. That comment stung. My husband was minimizing a serious violation of our home and privacy as mere drama. I ended the call shortly after feeling increasingly isolated in my own distress. When James finally arrived home the following evening, things had only deteriorated further. Vanessa had taken over the bathroom closest to the living room, filling the counters with her pregnancy creams, vitamins, and toiletries. She had also rearranged the kitchen cabinets to make room for her special pregnancy teas and snacks. My father had made multiple trips to her house, bringing more of her belongings each time. James and I retreated to our bedroom for a private conversation as soon as he arrived home. I could tell from his face that he was shocked by the extent of the takeover, having expected perhaps a suitcase or two rather than what looked like a complete move. "This is way more than I thought," he admitted, running a hand through his hair. "But Olivia, she is my sister and she is pregnant. I cannot just throw her out on the street." "No one is talking about the street, James," I said, struggling to keep my voice down. "She has multiple options. She could go to her parents, her sister, her friends. Hell, she could even go back to her own house and call Brian to come home, which is what should happen anyway." James sat on the edge of our bed looking torn. "I know, but she is really upset right now. Brian said some harsh things about her spending and she feels abandoned. Could we maybe let her stay just for a few days until things cool down? A week at most." I could not believe what I was hearing. My own husband was suggesting we accommodate an invasion of our home that had been executed without our permission. "So you are taking her side?" I asked, hurt evident in my voice. "After she and my father went behind our backs and used the emergency key to move her in while we were both away." "I am not taking sides," James protested weakly. "I am just trying to find a solution that works for everyone. She is family and she is pregnant." "Being pregnant does not give her the right to take over our home," I countered. "And being family does not mean we have to accept disrespect and boundary violations." We went back and forth for nearly an hour, with James caught between loyalty to his sister and support for his wife. In the end, he reluctantly agreed that Vanessa could not stay long-term but still wanted to offer her a few days to make other arrangements. When we emerged from the bedroom, we found my father and Vanessa in the kitchen. My father was cooking dinner, having taken the liberty of using our food without asking. Vanessa was sitting at the island counter, scrolling through her phone. "We need to talk about this situation," I announced firmly. What followed was one of the most frustrating conversations of my life. My father continued to defend his actions, insisting he had done the right thing by helping family in need. He dismissed my concerns about boundaries and permission as petty in the face of Vanessa's emergency. "What kind of person refuses to help a pregnant woman in distress?" he asked, as if I had suggested throwing Vanessa into traffic rather than expecting her to stay in any of the numerous other available accommodations. Vanessa, for her part, cycled between tears and indignation. She patted her pregnant belly frequently, as if to remind us all of her condition. She spoke about how stressful this was for the baby, how Brian had abandoned her, still not true, and how she had nowhere else to go, also not true. "My doctor said I need to avoid stress for the baby's sake," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I just need a safe, calm place to stay until Brian comes to his senses." James, weakened by his sister's tears, suggested again that she could stay just for a few days while she figured out a more permanent solution. This only emboldened Vanessa. "Actually," she said, wiping her tears with surprising speed, "I was thinking I would stay until after the baby is born. The nursery at our house is not finished yet, and with Brian being so unreliable right now, I need to be somewhere stable." I nearly choked on my own breath. "Until after the baby is born, that is 2 more months at least. Absolutely not." "See how selfish she is being," my father said to James, as if I were not even in the room. "Her own sister-in-law needs help. And she cannot spare a corner of this big house for a few weeks." I felt like I was taking crazy pills. No one seemed to acknowledge the fundamental issue. They had moved Vanessa in without permission, using a key meant for emergencies, rearranging my home without consent. "This is not about whether Vanessa needs help." I tried to explain for what felt like the 100th time. "This is about respect and boundaries. You cannot just decide to move someone into another person's home without their permission." "Family does not need permission to help family," my father countered, a phrase he had repeated several times already. Feeling increasingly cornered and frustrated, I finally issued an ultimatum. "Vanessa, you have 24 hours to find somewhere else to stay. This is not negotiable." My father's face reddened with anger. "That is ridiculous. She is not going anywhere." "I will stay here too if necessary, to make sure you do not bully her while she is vulnerable." "You most certainly will not," I snapped. "This is my house, not yours." "This is James's house too," Vanessa interjected, looking to her brother for support. And he wants me to stay. Do not you, James. Put on the spot, James stammered something non-committal about wanting to help but also respecting my feelings. His wishy-washy response only emboldened Vanessa and my father further. It is settled then, Vanessa announced. I will stay until after Ethan is born. Maybe longer since I will need help with a newborn. That night was one of the most uncomfortable of my life. Vanessa took over the living room, completely turning the television volume up loud as she watched reality shows until well past midnight. My father stayed until nearly 11, bringing in yet more of Vanessa's belongings, including a large exercise ball she claimed was necessary for her pregnancy. I lay awake beside James, feeling betrayed not just by my father and sister-in-law, but by my husband's inability to stand firmly with me against this invasion. The walls of my own home felt like they were closing in my personal space, and autonomy stripped away by people who claimed to love me. Tomorrow, I decided, as I finally drifted into uneasy sleep, would be different. I would not allow this situation to continue no matter what it took. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of unfamiliar voices in my kitchen. Throwing on a robe, I ventured out to discover Vanessa had invited her friend Pamela over for breakfast. They were using my good china and had prepared an elaborate spread of pancakes, fruit, and yogurt parfaits, creating a mess that spread across every counter surface. Oh, good morning, Vanessa chirped when she saw me as if this were perfectly normal. I hope we did not wake you. Pamela came over to help me organize my things. I made enough breakfast for everyone. I stood frozen in the doorway, taking in the scene. Less than 48 hours after moving in without permission, Vanessa was already hosting guests in my home, using my belongings as if they were her own. Vanessa, I said, keeping my voice measured. Despite my rising anger, you cannot invite people over without asking first. This is not your house. Pamela looked uncomfortable, glancing between us. Vanessa merely rolled her eyes. Pamela is helping me set up the nursery corner in the living room. We will not be in your way. Nursery corner, I repeated, my alarm growing. Vanessa, you are not staying here long enough to need a nursery corner. We will see about that, she muttered, turning back to her friend. I retreated to the bedroom to dress for work, my mind racing. The situation was escalating beyond what I had anticipated. This was no longer about a temporary stay during a marital spat. Vanessa was clearly planning to establish a long-term residence in my home. When I returned to the kitchen, my father had arrived carrying yet another box. He barely acknowledged me as he passed through to the living room, where I could hear him and Pamela discussing the best placement for Vanessa's rocking chair. Dad, I called, following him. We need to talk. Now. He reluctantly stepped into the hallway with me, his expression already defensive. I want my emergency key back, I stated firmly. You have abused the trust we placed in you by using it to move Vanessa in without our permission. I am not giving it back, he replied without hesitation. Not when you are being so unreasonable about helping family. The key stays with me in case Vanessa needs anything while you and James are at work. His blatant refusal stunned me. That key was for emergencies only, not for you to let yourself in whenever you want, or to move people into our house. You clearly do not understand what family means, he said, his tone condescending. When I was growing up, we helped each other without all these selfish conditions and boundaries you seem so obsessed with. This is not about being selfish, I insisted. This is about respect and common decency. You do not move into someone's house without their permission, family or not. Our argument grew louder, attracting Vanessa's attention. She waddled over one hand on her lower back, the other protectively cradling her belly. Why are you shouting at Walter? She demanded. He has been nothing but helpful during this horrible time for me. Unlike some people, he actually cares about my well-being and the babies. This is not about whether I care, I tried to explain, my frustration mounting. This is about the fact that you two conspired to move you into my house without asking me. That is not okay under any circumstances. I had nowhere else to go, Vanessa insisted, her voice rising dramatically. What kind of person refuses to help a pregnant woman whose husband has abandoned her? Brian did not abandon you, I corrected for what felt like the 100th time. And you have multiple other places you could go. Your parents, your sister, your numerous friends. None of them have space, she lied again. Your sister has a 4-bedroom house and 1 child, I pointed out. She uses the extra rooms for her home business, Vanessa countered. And anyway, her house has too many stairs, which is dangerous for me right now. The excuses were endless and increasingly transparent. I turned back to my father, who was watching our exchange with obvious disapproval of my position. Dad, this is the last time I am asking nicely. Please give me back my key. No, he said flatly. I do not trust you to make the right decision right now. You are being selfish and cruel to Vanessa in her time of need. Something in me snapped at his words. I was being characterized as the villain for simply wanting autonomy over my own home, for expecting basic respect of my boundaries. Fine, I said, my voice cold. Consider this your formal notice you are both trespassing in my home. I want you to leave today. Vanessa's eyes widened in theatrical shock. You cannot kick out a pregnant woman. James would never allow it. James and I will discuss this tonight, I replied. But my position is clear. This arrangement was made without my consent, and I do not agree to it. My father stepped closer, his expression hardening. If you keep pushing this, Olivia, I will make sure everyone in the family knows how you treated your pregnant sister-in-law. How you put your selfish desire for privacy above helping family in crisis? Is that really what you want? His threat was clear: comply or face family ostracism. It was manipulative and unfair, but not surprising given his behavior thus far. I left for work shortly after, unable to continue the argument without saying something I might regret. Throughout the day, I received a barrage of text messages from Vanessa about items she needed me to pick up on my way home, as if I had agreed to be her personal shopper. My father also texted, sending me links to articles about the importance of family support during pregnancy, as if that somehow justified their actions. When I returned home that evening, I discovered 2 more alarming developments. First, while searching for an important document in my home office, I found a handwritten list in Vanessa's handwriting titled, Baby Registry Items to Order. It included furniture, clothing, and supplies with a note at the top for nursery at Olivia's house. Second, and even more disturbing, I discovered that my father had changed the lock on our back door without telling me. I only realized when my key no longer worked. When confronted, he casually mentioned he had upgraded our security and would give me the new key once you start being reasonable about Vanessa staying. These discoveries clarified something important. This was no longer just about helping Vanessa through a difficult time. This was about control. My father and Vanessa were systematically taking over my home, making changes without permission, and establishing a situation where they controlled the terms of my own living arrangement. I found James in our bedroom, having just returned from work himself. His expression was weary as I recounted the day's events. They changed our lock, James, I emphasized, still in disbelief. Without asking or telling us. And Vanessa is planning to set up a full nursery here. She intends to stay indefinitely. James ran a hand over his face. This has gone too far, he finally admitted. I was willing to help Vanessa for a short time, but they are completely overstepping. What are we going to do? I asked, relieved that he finally seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. I will talk to Vanessa tonight, he promised. And your dad. This cannot continue. But the conversation did not go as planned. When James attempted to set boundaries, Vanessa burst into tears, claiming stress was endangering the baby. My father accused James of being under my thumb and abandoning his own sister when she needed him most. The argument escalated until Vanessa dramatically clutched her belly and claimed to be having contractions, effectively shutting down any further discussion. Though the contractions mysteriously subsided, once James agreed to revisit the conversation another day, the manipulation was clear. As we lay in bed that night, I realized we had reached a critical juncture. Rational conversation had failed. Boundaries were being ignored. My own home had been effectively hijacked with new locks I did not have keys to, and a pregnant woman setting up a nursery in my living room. This is not going to get better, I told James softly in the darkness. They have no intention of respecting our wishes or our home. What choice do we have? He asked, sounding defeated. I cannot physically remove my pregnant sister. I was quiet for a long moment before responding. There is one option we have not considered yet. And in that moment, I made the decision that would change everything. The next morning, after James left for work, and while my father was still at his house, I made a phone call that I never imagined I would have to make. With shaking hands, I dialed the non-emergency police line and explained my situation to the officer who answered. My father used an emergency key to move my sister-in-law into my home without permission while I was at work, I explained. I have repeatedly asked them to leave, but they refuse. My father has even changed one of the locks without giving me a key. The officer asked several clarifying questions. Was my name on the deed to the house? Yes, along with my husband's. Had I clearly communicated that they did not have permission to stay? Yes, multiple times. Did I fear for my safety? Not physically, but my home and privacy were being violated. This sounds like a civil matter with trespassing elements, the officer eventually said. We can send officers to your home to assist with removing unwanted occupants. Would you like us to do that? I took a deep breath and said yes, arranging for them to come that afternoon when I knew both Vanessa and my father would be there. I did not call James to tell him what I was doing. I knew he would try to talk me out of it, caught between loyalty to his sister and to me. But this had gone beyond a family disagreement. This was about my right to safety and autonomy in my own home. At 3:30 that afternoon, 2 police officers arrived at my house. I met them outside and provided my identification and proof of ownership of the property. I explained the situation again in detail, including the changed locks and my father's refusal to return the emergency key. When we entered the house, Vanessa was napping on the sofa bed in the living room, and my father was in the kitchen preparing a snack. Their expressions when they saw the officers behind me ranged from shock to outrage. What is going on? My father demanded, stepping forward. Why are the police here? These homeowners have reported that you are on the property without permission, one of the officers explained calmly. They have asked you to leave and you have refused. Is that correct? This is ridiculous, my father sputtered. I am her father. And that is her sister-in-law who is 7 months pregnant. Family relationships do not override property rights, sir, the officer replied. If the homeowners have asked you to leave their property and you have refused, that constitutes trespassing. Vanessa had struggled to her feet by this point, her face a mask of indignation and theatrical distress. She cannot kick me out. I am pregnant and have nowhere to go. James said I could stay here. Is James your husband, ma'am? The second officer asked me. Yes, I confirmed. He is at work right now. This is between me and my daughter, my father interjected, moving closer to the officers. You have no right to interfere in a family matter? Actually, sir, we do when laws are being broken, the first officer corrected. You need to gather your belongings and leave the premises as requested by the homeowner. I am not going anywhere, my father declared, crossing his arms. This is absurd. Call James. He will tell you this is all a misunderstanding. The officers exchanged glances, then turned back to my father. Sir, we are giving you the opportunity to leave voluntarily. If you refuse, we will have no choice but to place you under arrest for trespassing. Arrest, my father laughed incredulously. You would arrest a 64-year-old man for helping his pregnant daughter-in-law. Go ahead and try. The media will love that story. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. As my father continued to refuse to leave and became increasingly belligerent, the officers warned him multiple times that he would be arrested. When he still would not comply and actually put his hand on one officer's arm to emphasize a point, they had no choice but to handcuff him. Walter Sanders, you are under arrest for trespassing and resisting an officer, the policeman stated formally. You have the right to remain silent. As they recited his Miranda rights, Vanessa began screaming, one hand clutching her belly dramatically. You are killing my baby with stress. How could you do this to your own father, Olivia? To your nephew. The second officer turned to Vanessa. Ma'am, do you need medical attention? Should we call an ambulance? No, she snapped, dropping the distressed act momentarily. I need you to stop arresting Walter and leave us alone. Then you need to gather your essential belongings and leave the premises as requested by the homeowner, the officer stated firmly. You can return for the rest of your things at a mutually agreed upon time. As my father was escorted to the police car, he called over his shoulder. You will regret this, Olivia. This is not what family does to each other. Vanessa, realizing the officers were serious, began hastily gathering her purse and phone. James will hear about this, she hissed at me. Everyone will hear how you had your own father arrested and threw your pregnant sister-in-law onto the street. You have multiple places you could go, Vanessa, I reminded her, my voice steady, despite my internal turmoil. This was your choice, not mine. The officers helped ensure Vanessa left peacefully, suggesting she call a friend or family member to pick her up. They also advised me to change the locks again, and documented the situation in case of future incidents. After they left, I sat on my couch in the silent house, shaking with the aftermath of adrenaline and emotion. I had just had my own father arrested. It was a line I never imagined crossing, but one that had become necessary when all other options were exhausted. I called James immediately after explaining what had happened before he heard it from someone else. His initial reaction was shock and anger. You had my sister and your father removed by the police without even calling me first, he demanded. Olivia, how could you make that decision alone? Because you were not making it with me, I replied, my voice breaking. You kept trying to compromise with people who had no intention of respecting our boundaries. They changed our locks, James. They were setting up a nursery. This was never going to end if we did not take drastic action. James was silent for a long moment before sighing heavily. I understand why you felt you had to do it, he finally said. But this is going to have serious repercussions for our family relationships. He was right. Within hours, my phone was flooded with angry messages from relatives on both sides. James's parents called furious that I had thrown their pregnant daughter onto the street. My aunts and cousins expressed shock that I would have my own father arrested. Even Brian, Vanessa's husband, called to berate me for causing his wife additional stress during her pregnancy. The narrative being spread was predictably one-sided cruel. Olivia had her elderly father arrested for simply trying to help her pregnant sister-in-law who had nowhere else to go. The facts that they had moved in without permission, refused to leave when asked, and changed my locks without my consent were conveniently omitted. James came home early from work, and we had a long, difficult conversation about what had happened and where we would go from here. For the first time, he admitted that he had been trying too hard to please everyone at the expense of our marriage and our boundaries. I should have been more firm with Vanessa from the beginning, he acknowledged. I was trying to be a good brother, but in the process, I was being a bad husband. I am sorry, Olivia. That night, James called Brian directly and explained the situation from our perspective, including all the details Vanessa had likely omitted. To our surprise, Brian was more understanding than expected once he heard the full story. I had no idea they moved her in without permission, he admitted. Vanessa told me you had invited her to stay and then suddenly changed your mind. I should have known there was more to it. Brian revealed that he had only intended to stay away for 2 nights to cool off after their argument. He had already been planning to return home when he received the call about Vanessa being evicted. He agreed to come pick up the rest of her things the next day and assured us that she would be staying with him from now on. My father, meanwhile, spent 24 hours in holding before being released. He refused to speak to me directly, sending only a text message that read, I hope you are satisfied with your choice. This is not what I raised you to be. The family fallout was significant and painful. James and I found ourselves isolated from both sides of the family, portrayed as the villains in a situation where we had simply tried to protect our home and boundaries. It was a harsh reminder that sometimes standing up for yourself comes at a considerable cost. The immediate aftermath of having my father arrested was as difficult as I had feared. For the first week, I received daily calls or messages from family members expressing their disappointment or outright anger. James's mother refused to speak to me at all, communicating with her son only through terse text messages that deliberately excluded me. My father maintained his silence, though I heard through my aunt that he was telling anyone who would listen about his ungrateful daughter who had him arrested for trying to help family. Vanessa, now back with Brian in their own home, had apparently turned her experience into a dramatic saga of persecution and abandonment. According to James's cousin, who remained neutral enough to keep us informed, she had claimed I threatened her and the baby, a complete fabrication that nevertheless gained traction among those already inclined to take her side. The stress took its toll on our marriage as well. Though James had ultimately supported my decision, there was a new tension between us. He moved temporarily into the guest room, saying he needed space to process everything that had happened. I spent several nights crying alone, wondering if standing up for our boundaries had cost me my marriage along with my family relationships. Recognizing that I needed help processing the trauma and guilt, I sought out a therapist who specialized in family dynamics. Dr. Maxwell helped me understand that what had happened was not simply a disagreement, but a fundamental violation of boundaries and respect. What your father and sister-in-law did was a form of emotional abuse, she explained during one session. They used manipulation guilt and practical tactics like changing your locks to control your space and autonomy. Your reaction, while extreme, came after multiple attempts to resolve the situation peacefully. With her guidance, I began to work through my complicated feelings about the incident, the guilt for having my father arrested, the anger at being violated in my own home, the hurt of being villainized by family for simply protecting my boundaries, the fear that I had irreparably damaged important relationships. About 3 weeks after the incident, James and I had a breakthrough conversation. We sat on our back porch with cups of tea, the evening air cool around us. I have been thinking a lot about what happened, he began. At first, I was angry that you called the police without consulting me. But the more I reflect on it, the more I realize you had tried everything else. We both had. They left us no choice. I still feel terrible about it, I admitted. I never wanted to have my father arrested. Oh, you gave them multiple opportunities to leave peacefully, James reminded me. They refused. What else were we supposed to do? Let them take over our home indefinitely. That conversation marked a turning point for us. James moved back into our bedroom that night, and we began the process of rebuilding our sense of security in our home. We changed all the locks and installed a security system. We agreed on clear boundaries for family moving forward. No one would have keys to our home except us. Visits would be by invitation only, and any requests to stay with us would be discussed thoroughly by both of us, before a decision was made. 2 months later, Vanessa gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Despite the ongoing tension, James went to the hospital to meet his nephew. I chose to stay home, recognizing that my presence would only create additional stress during what should be a joyful time. When James returned, he showed me pictures of the baby, a tiny bundle with Brian's dark hair and Vanessa's button nose. She asked about you, James said carefully. Wanted to know if you would be coming to see the baby. What did you tell her? I asked. I said that would depend on her willingness to acknowledge what happened and apologize for her part in it. Vanessa's response had been predictably defensive, but it was the first time the possibility of reconciliation had even been mentioned. It was a small opening, but an opening nonetheless. My father proved more difficult. It took nearly 6 months before he agreed to meet with me, and only then with my aunt present as a mediator. We met at a neutral coffee shop, the awkwardness between us palpable as we took our seats. I did not come to apologize, he said immediately, his expression stiff. What you did was unforgivable. I did not ask you here for an apology, I replied, keeping my voice calm despite the anxiety coursing through me. I asked you here because, despite everything, you are still my father, and I would like to find a way forward. The conversation that followed was difficult and at times painful. My father maintained that he had done nothing wrong, that helping family should always take precedence over selfish concerns about privacy and space. I explained as clearly as I could how his actions had felt like a fundamental betrayal of trust and respect. When you used that key to move Vanessa in without asking me, you sent a clear message that my home, my space, and my feelings did not matter, I told him. When you changed my locks without giving me a key, you took away my security in my own house. Can you understand why that felt so violating? For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty cross his face. I never meant to make you feel unsafe, he said slowly. I just thought you were being stubborn about helping Vanessa. It was never about whether I would help her, I explained. It was about the fact that neither of you respected me enough to ask first. You made decisions about my home without my input as if I were a child instead of an adult, with the right to determine who lives in my own space. We did not resolve everything that day, or in the several conversations that followed. But gradually, my father began to acknowledge that he had overstepped, even if he still believed his intentions were good. 6 months after our first meeting, he returned the original emergency key that he had kept despite the lock changes. I still think family should help each other, he said as he placed the key on the table between us. But I understand now that help should be offered, not forced. It was as close to an apology as I was likely to get, and I accepted it for what it was. As for Vanessa, our relationship remained strained but civil. The birth of her son had shifted her focus somewhat, giving her less time and energy for drama. When I finally met my nephew at his christening, she was polite but distant. Over time, as the intensity of the conflict faded, we established a careful relationship based on clear boundaries and limited direct interaction. The most profound change, however, was within myself. Through this painful experience, I learned the vital importance of establishing and maintaining healthy boundaries, even with those closest to me. I discovered my own strength in standing up for myself despite the disapproval and anger of others. And I came to understand that true family support is built on mutual respect and consent, not obligation and coercion. James and I emerged from the experience with a stronger marriage, having learned to communicate more clearly about our needs and expectations. We became partners in protecting our shared space and boundaries, no longer allowing ourselves to be manipulated by family, drama, or guilt. Today, a year after that terrible Tuesday when I came home to find my house invaded, I can look back with the clarity of distance. What happened was painful and disruptive, but it forced necessary changes in how I relate to my family and how I value myself. I no longer apologize for having boundaries or feel guilty for protecting my space and peace. Have you ever had to take drastic measures to protect your personal boundaries? How did you handle family members who refused to respect your space? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Please like this video if you have ever had to stand up for yourself against family pressure, and subscribe to hear more stories about navigating complicated family dynamics. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, loving your family does not mean letting them walk all over you.